Welcome to the Depth of Field podcast, where film, video, and animation professionals discuss the art of their craft and realities of the industry. Today, we're diving into visual effects with a very talented artist who's currently working on commercials with Apple and short films that are getting a lot of attention. Stay tuned till the end, where he gives you a practical encouragement that you can think on this week. All right, let's do this. Hey guys, I'm here with Jesse Boots, a very talented filmmaker who's balancing a career in corporate video with companies like Apple, Yahoo, and Google, as well as a portfolio of incredible short films, one of which has over 2.7 million views on YouTube. Jesse, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Adrian. It's great to be here.
You've been working on some really cool stuff, but before we get into that, I'd love to hear just really briefly how you got started with short films and visual effects.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of aspiring filmmakers, started when I was much younger, in my teens. But in terms of, getting into some of the more serious short films, I went to college at De Anza Community College, had a lot of friends there that I networked and collaborated with. And making short films, obviously, in community college allows you to meet a lot of different people, and a lot of those relationships carried on after I left college, specifically with one of my good friends, Michael Chance. We endeavored to make the short film you just referenced, Project Arbiter, kind of science fiction World War II film. So it kind of just spiraled out of going to community college, connecting with friends, and staying together and forming a little tight-knit group.
Before we were recording, you mentioned having a passion for directing and you like creating your own short films as well, but you're also a very well-established visual effects artist. How have you balanced those two things, working on as a visual effects artist, but also still thinking about and pursuing your own projects?
It's tough because I think a lot of people that want to get into the filmmaking industry, aspire to be a director or a producer or a writer. And I'm no different than them, and a lot of my friends are the same. But as we get older and we evolve, and depending what success we're finding, I think a lot of people start to navigate to different parts of the industry, whether that be post-production, pre-production, or different roles within physical production or live action production. And so even though I was always an aspiring filmmaker and wanting to direct or write or produce films, and as generic as it sounds, be a storyteller, right out of college, when I transferred from De Anza Community College to San Francisco State, I got an opportunity to do an internship at a visual effects kind of post-production boutique house called Entropic, based out of San Francisco, California. And so I was splitting time between this visual effects post-production house and SF State. And it came to a point that I kind of had to choose one or the other. And I actually decided to step away from San Francisco State, dropped out, and went all in with this visual effects boutique house, this post-production house, because I thought it allotted me a lot of opportunities to kind of, learn a lot, not just about post-production, but kind of be in a professional environment. Also, you need to make a living, so trying to make a little bit of money. And then from there, I kind of just fell into post-production and building that skill set up, particularly with editorial, visual effects, specifically with finishing, conforming, and compositing. So that's how I kind of transitioned from always trying to be a aspiring filmmaker to actually now doing something in practice with filmmaking, but on the post-production side.
You've worked on some really awesome short films like Whipping Boy and Project Arbiter. I think I would describe Whipping Boy as being a futuristic setting in San Francisco, I believe, or was that a specific city?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like a dystopian future city.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, so a lot of futuristic stuff there, and then Project Arbiter was set in World War II with like futuristic weapons or high-tech weapons that were classified. So I'm just curious, like picture somebody who is looking at these projects, and guys, I'll post the links in the show notes so you can check out these films. But to somebody who's watching that and just wondering, how would they get to a place where they're working on that level of film?
Not to deter and people's pursuits of trying to do films like this and the undertaking that follows. But it's kind of a perfect storm of a lot of things. But starting with Arbiter, I think me and Mike go back, Mike Chance, who is the director and creator of that project, and I was a producer and VFX soup on it. We've known each other for a long time. It was in development for a long time. And by me working at this visual effects company, and not just working there, but being fortunate enough to have access to this software and these tools to be able to use for my personal projects was key. having that support from my work to pursue personal projects in off time, on weekends, at night, in the early morning, on lunches was crucial. So not to say that you have to have someone that works at one of these types of companies or has, this type of skill set. It definitely helps. I do feel it's become slightly easier just in terms of, even though software can still be kind of pricey, I think just the access to it and the access to learning on how to use it is just becoming so saturated, online, that I think it would be much easier to do that type of film today. Whereas before I would have to, me and Mike would be commuting to the office on the weekends, every weekend, or staying late at night. You can do a lot of it at home. I think, though, it starts with being genuine and excited and finding something that is exciting to people for this project, which in this case, this one was, where people want to help and want to contribute and see the potential of what it can be. And it takes a lot of work and a lot of sacrifice and support. But I feel that with the tools that are available now, it's much easier to make these kinds of films in your backyard.
You mentioned going to the offices late at night, and you guys are both working full-time jobs, a director, and you guys are choosing to go work on this several nights. You're investing a lot of hours into it. So I'm curious to hear what's driving you to just take this to that level, even when you must be tired, you must want to just go to sleep. There's something that you guys are envisioning that's taking you to that place where you can find that energy to do that. How would you describe where that's coming from and what you're shooting for when you're doing that?
If you were to ask me that question back then when I was in it, I'd probably have a different answer. But upon having some time away and being able to now reflect and articulate it in a clearer way, I think what it comes down to is when we think about aspiring filmmaking and trying to make movies and trying to break into an industry or find the proper delivery, for the content you're creating, right? You want to tell a story, you want to do something that takes the audience somewhere or shows them something new. It's very easy to get excited about that and passionate about it. But I think what happens a lot is people can get really excited about ideas and projects they shoot. And there's that common phrase about, short films die in post-production, is because it can become a drawn-out process, especially with visual effects. I mean, you can easily get overwhelmed and burdened. But I think with a lot of people, specifically with friends or, maybe casual acquaintances or other people, they think it's kind of a hobby, right? And when something's a hobby, you play a little bit, I think, looser in terms of your urgency and your commitment. I think you have to reframe your perception that this is work. And as fun as it is to create these things, you have to treat it as work. And sometimes, as fun as it is to create movies, it's going to get a little bit grueling. It's going to get tiring. It's not going to be fun. But when you can treat it and perceive it to be like it is another job or like work, and you can start to put schedules and deadlines and be accountable in a way, I think that definitely helps get things done. On top of what I just feel maybe comes a little bit more naturally to some of the people that I've worked with is just having also the sheer will. You know what I mean? Like, you just want it. You want to, this is what you want to do, and you got to put that time in and that sacrifice. And it definitely helps to have a great support system. I mean, a lot of people, especially as we've gotten older, you get married or you have families and you have other things that start to take up your time. Probably things that I would say are more important as well. But it still comes down to, hopefully you're with, a person or surrounded by people that do support it. And you do have to know that you are going to make some sacrifices and be okay with that.
Totally. I like what you said about some people viewing it as a hobby, but that you guys can't afford to take that mindset, because what you guys are doing is trying to reach for the highest level possible. And what I find really impressive about Project Arbiter having 2.7 million views, which I think is a real testament to the amount of work you've put in, because there's a lot of viral videos that might go around that get that kind of views, that it might be just a cat on a piano or something, right? But creating this type of work to get people to share it is such a different level of creative energy, like crafting a story and creating such a high production value. It's being shared for an entirely different reason. It's because people were drawn into this environment and they actually really enjoyed it for, I would say, like a deeper purpose, right? Rather than just some funny value. And to create that just takes so much work. And like you said, people that might be doing it for a hobby, there's such a fine line between cliche or cheesy movies because they just don't have that attention to detail and it's not well planned out and it just doesn't communicate well. It just shows in the work that you guys are producing that you know what makes a high production value movie, and that's what you want to create because you want to capture people's attention and actually have them watch it.
Yeah, and I, not to put the film on too high of a pedestal myself, but one thing that I also was very encouraged in, this isn't a cat video or some viral video that's only a minute long. I mean, this is a 15 to 20 minute short film. You know what I mean?
Exactly, yeah.
To carry people's attention, whether they're watching it all or not. I mean, you hope that everyone's watching the entire thing. But the fact that you could get that many hits on something that is that long is very encouraging, because I feel that people do watch it because if they didn't, it wouldn't get that many hits because it wouldn't be passed around or recommended as much.
Can you think of a moment during the time of these short films that was just particularly challenging, like a time where you guys are just down in the ditches and it's just a difficult situation that you had to walk through?
With Project Arbiter, we had a lot of visual effects that you'll see in the film, and some that you may not even see, that are hidden. And, when you have that amount of visual effects and you're as ambitious as we were, and you're working a lot of weekends, you're working a lot of nights, you kind of have to start setting boundaries, or at least I did, where I'd be like, okay, Mike, listen, honestly, we need to limit it to this, amount of shots for this sequence, or we can only, once we choose this angle for a shot, we kind of have to stick with it, because I can't keep going back maybe and trying new things with the artist, because we were starting to get not burnt out, but like we were getting to the end of the line, the end of the project, and we just needed to wrap it up. And there was this one specific shot, me and Mike and Vicky DeMay, who was a producer on the project, were at Entropic on a weekend, and we were doing all these plain VFX shots as it blows up this tank, and we had chosen an angle. And Mike had wanted to change it. And, I was kind of at the end of my rope, and I kind of snapped on him a little bit, unfortunately. And I was just like, we talked about this. We could only do this angle. We can't switch it anymore. And, we have to be it. And it was a trying time because, I think on film and in life in general, depending on the people, there's going to be times of conflict or heated exchange, or where you don't see eye to eye. And I think what that project allowed us to do, and specifically in this moment, is it was a time of tension between, me and Mike for a quick moment there. And then we both kind of shut down for a second. But then immediately within the same day, we come back together and we talk about it. And we try to still find a solution or a compromise to make sure that we're not settling for anything. And so you can get on these projects where they're so ambitious and they're so big, but in this small moment, I tend to think of myself as a kind of a calm, steady presence. I snapped, you know what I mean? And I snapped on someone, and sometimes that happens, but I think it's, you got to come back together and still figure out and try to work through the issue, and communication was key on that one. In terms of one that kind of went a little south real fast is on Whipping Boy, we had this 3D heart that was being projected from like some type of futuristic like television device or whatnot. And me and Mike were struggling to like figure out what it would look like. And we had another artist kind of give a go, and he didn't really want to finish it. He was just kind of messing around, but it helped it give us some inspiration. And so we're sitting in this small little corner of a room on this computer, huddled next to each other. And Mike is trying to direct and give me direction on what he wants to see, but then sometimes he also doesn't know what he wants to see, and is just kind of like, we're just trying to brainstorm, and I'm trying to think of it, and we're both just kind of, I think, hitting a wall creatively of like what to do. And then I just start messing around real quick on this heart thing and layering things a different way and trying different things. He's like, this is starting to look right. I think the problem is I just need to let you work, and I'll come back once you show me things. And he is, because, we thought it would be great if he was just sitting next to me the whole time, and we were just trying to figure it out like very granular and detailed, but it actually didn't work well that way, because what needed to happen is sometimes I think you have to fail a lot. You have to experiment. And every time I would try to experiment, it would initially be like, oh no, that's not right. But sometimes you need to take things further to find out whether it will be right or not. And in that moment, it taught me that as much as it's great to sometimes work next to someone and that can be successful in figuring certain things out. Sometimes you both need to step away and formulate separate ideas and then come back together.
Yeah. Sometimes in this type of creative work, you do just have to spend a few hours failing and trying things that are embarrassing to look at. Like you're always nervous when somebody's going to come look over your shoulder and what are you doing? It looks terrible. Well, yeah,
right.
That's just what it takes to get to the finished product.
And then you feel like you've lost all this momentum and whatnot. But it happens a lot. You know what I mean? A lot of it is experimenting, especially with things that you're taking inspiration from other forms of art or movies, but it's never going to be exactly like that, even if you wanted it to, just because you're not that person who created it. So
put it in perspective for the listeners. Do you remember how long it took from start to finish to get Project Arbiter to this place?
Yeah, so I don't know how long the pre-production process was in terms of the ideation of who these characters are, what the story is and whatnot. I do remember several small conversations with Mike about it. You know, him talking about this guy with an invisible suit and me talking about, I want to do this little like World War II thing with a tank coming over the hill, completely separate ideas that were never necessarily merged. And Mike's like, well, why don't you, do this visual effects thing with the tank? You just throw it in the short film that I'm doing or something. But I think he had went and kind of developed this suit and whatnot with the concept artist who had helped design the suit. And we came back, but that could have been a year, it could have been 2 years. It was probably at least 2 years. But in terms of the actual shooting, we shot in 2010, and we shot in Petaluma, California. And I think it was a 9-day shoot, 7 days on location, 2 days in studio. And then in terms of post-production, we went right into it, a couple weeks after. And I definitely finished my portion of the film in terms of VFX souping and helping produce and actually doing a lot of the shots myself in the 2012 timeframe. So it probably took about 2 years of nights and weekends. But in terms of the majority of the work, I would say it was definitely a 2-year process for this film.
Switching topics, we said in the beginning you're also working for companies like Apple, Yahoo, and Google. And recently you worked on the Apple Watch Series 2 video, which is awesome. I think probably everybody has seen that almost that would be listening to this show. What is it like working in that type of corporate environment in contrast to working on all these cinematic visual effects?
It's definitely been a great balance in terms of going back to some of the questions you were asking earlier in terms of how do you balance working a day job and then pursuing these creative endeavors outside of that. And the great thing about how the kind of corporate environment has helped is, and specifically with Apple and Google and these types of places, is you can kind of go in there and there's opportunities to be creative and then there's opportunities to execute on a technical level. There's always some level of creativity infused in a project, right? Whether it is creative in terms of the story or the maybe an editorial approach in terms of technique or helping flesh out ideas. But then also there's just technical executions of things that, yes, they're creative, but they feel a little bit more automatic in terms of you just have to put these pieces together in a way that is still captivating, but it doesn't, I guess, draw on the same energy, at least from me mentally, of where I'm pulling from for these side projects creatively. This industry, I think across the board, post-production, production, pre-production, and whether you're in film, commercial, or corporate, tends to have longer hours, but I think there's a good balance with the corporate work specifically that you have peaks and valleys. And so it scales up to get really busy and challenging in terms of time and hours, and then it kind of goes down.
I'm curious to hear what you think about the differences in collaboration. I mean, there's so much creative collaboration with short film creation, and I wonder if you think or what your perspective is on these type of large corporate projects. What's your experience and what's different about that type of collaboration more specifically that you notice with all of these people involved?
There's definitely a lot more people involved, and I think there's a lot more stakes. Whereas with a short film, at least in my experience, and definitely recently, you're coming in as someone that is, I think, a little bit more pivotal to the process. A producer, a writer, a director, and so you might have a little bit more say and influence in terms of how the film is shaped. In terms of some of the corporate work, I don't want to say I'm a cog in the wheel, but I'm just one aspect of a huge team of people that are working. So it's not that that my voice isn't heard or whatnot. It's just that there's a lot more voices and a lot more departments and individuals that these products affect. And so you're having to work with a lot of different teams and work across different departments. Like, if I'm doing something that's like an ad, I have to make sure that there is some type of symmetry in terms of the branding or the messaging with web and with, event stuff. So there has to be a cohesion, whether it's for a product, or for whatever it's for, across the board. And so I think that's the fundamental difference, is that you're an important part, but you're a much smaller part, and in terms of how your overall impact.
So there's been a lot happening in terms of visual effects in Hollywood, specifically with Rhythm and Hughes going out of business after winning an Oscar for Life of Pi, which was a kind of a dramatic thing that I saw even on Facebook. There was a big movement that was just trying to draw attention to that. And I'm curious to hear just what you think about the state of that, and just, do you think anything's improving, or do you think that the visual effects industry is just kind of in a weird spot overall?
I definitely think it's in a weird spot. I think the one thing I do appreciate about, as I came up and was an aspiring filmmaker and still trying to make films today, is by being able to work at a visual effects boutique house and getting that kind of exposure to that world and what artists and companies go through, definitely makes you a little bit more aware and sensitive to how they're treated and how much they do in terms of work for usually a lot less money. I really cherish that as a director. I can understand that and appreciate the amount of work that goes into a lot of these films, because a lot of people, you go make a movie, and I'm just going to call it big blockbuster A. These visual effects artists, they pour in blood, sweat, and tears and hours upon hours of work. And these films can be dismissed very easily, which is unfortunate, because, even though from a narrative standpoint, it definitely should want the best, but that doesn't, I think, discredit all the work going into it. And so circling back to the state of the industry, it's in a weird place, because I think with a lot of productions, you spend your money on the things that come first. And what comes first? Pre-production, then production. And then by the time you get to post-production, I think I generally find that the amount of money left over, specifically for visual effects, because there's many aspects of post-production. I feel visual effects tends to get the short end of the stick. And you see that reflected in how the industry has shifted and changed and moved, to whereas San Francisco and LA used to be a lot bigger in terms of a lot of the visual effects companies and the work being done there. Now we're going to Vancouver, we're going to London, we're going to Singapore, where these tax subsidies happen. And I'm not saying that's all bad or all good, but what happens is, the reason why they're doing that is because studios want to save money, and the companies need to save money, and they need to make money. And because there's this huge competition and this drive to undercut to get the jobs, you're getting 3 bids for these projects, where it's like these companies are struggling to survive. They're undercutting their budgets to try to book the jobs, and then sometimes they're not getting the overages, or they're getting more revisions coming in and they're not getting overages, which means bigger budget or additional money for what was originally bid for them. When a company like Rhythm and Hughes, which can win an Academy Award and have a speech at the Oscars, can go out of business.
I think that very week they went out of business, right? Or that month?
Yeah, it was not too long after. And that's just a byproduct of, I think, visual effects just still aren't as respected or given their due. I think visual effects are in a weird place, and I feel that a lot of it has to do with undercutting the budgets and treating them as like they're at the end of the line of the production, and they're expected to deliver the most, you know what I mean? And not compromise as much. And it causes this really, I think, bad competition and drive to try to survive in this industry.
Yeah. You make some great points. I actually didn't think about how post-production being at the end would get the least money, because they've spent it all in other areas. But there's actually a very real cliche in filmmaking where people say, we'll fix it in post, which I think is cliche because it's actually very common, right? I mean, people actually will say that, and it's just less common to have a script that maybe isn't done and then to say, oh, we'll fix the story in production. We'll just kind of wing it and hope that the actors can fill the gaps where the writing falls short. I remember when this happened, I was actually kind of not very sympathetic, just thinking like, oh, well, these companies just aren't good business people, right? They're just overly passionate creatives and they don't know how to get a good deal. But I think what I wasn't realizing, like you mentioned, was the level of competition is so high and everybody's trying to undercut each other. And that's really not healthy for the industry overall. And I think the lack of the union isn't improving that situation either. But I can imagine these studios wanting to land these jobs so desperately. And even with Rhythm and Hughes, they won an Oscar, which probably was their highest priority, like obviously more so than making money. They were so passionate about just creating good visual effects that it was like it became the end of them, which is really sad. And it seems like there does need to be some sort of a coming together so that people can at least focus on the work without having to drive each other out of business. But I don't know. It's an interesting topic because that's also like capitalism and what America is. But like you said, they're going away from America, and it's getting into a kind of a dark place when you really explore it.
Yeah, definitely.
So we talked about technology changing, and I'm just curious what you see in terms of like industry tools and exciting things that are happening. Like what's something that you're noticing?
I think just things are becoming easier to do. Like people are just writing tools and plugins, whether they're proprietary or third-party plugins for different softwares and whatnot, that just get you there so much faster. A good example of this would be Autodesk Flame has this tool that I was just messing around with, and essentially it's called Gmask Tracer, and it allows you to build a bunch of garbage masks, which are shapes that you make, and usually they're associated with like rotoscoping or doing roto, so you're like cutting out different parts of some type of subject in a frame to either put something behind or in front or whatnot. And so, long story short, though, there's these masks in Gmask Tracer where you can literally make all these little masks around a subject, and the subject doesn't even have to be on green screen or blue screen, which is traditionally where you would shoot maybe some type of foreground or background element that you're then compositing into another background plate. They don't even have to be on blue screen or green screen, and you can yield these like almost perfect mats, which you use as your alpha channel to isolate that subject from its plate. And I was just blown away. I was just like, the fact that you can have something in the specific tutorial I saw was it was like a lion. And lions are warmer tones, tans and browns and whatnot. And it was against a background that was whites and lighter colors and crown molding that was white and things that wouldn't traditionally clash with colors of the subject that's in front of them. And they were able to pull this key and put this lion in another hotel room. I think it was for like a hotel, some type of ad. And it looked like it was there.
That could take days depending on how long the shot is, right? Rotoscoping, something like that.
And they made it, they did it in minutes. And so little things like that I see of just how the tools have become just more accessible, more easier to work with, and being able to learn how to use them properly, I think is truly fascinating and allows, more and more people who don't have bigger budgets or want to do something that is otherwise would seem very difficult, more possible now.
So what you're saying is now you have some more free time to just relax and do nothing for a little bit?
Yeah. Or, more shots.
More shots and more films.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, Jesse, I want to wrap this up for you because you've already been with me a lot longer than I said it would take. So
that's fine. Yeah.
One thing I want to always end a show on is some sort of an encouragement that the listeners can chew on this week, whether they're in visual effects or not, that they should start doing in their life to maybe head on a similar path or just to accomplish bigger things in their career.
Yeah, I think the thing that has helped me a lot is to dedicate or allocate a certain amount of time every week to whatever it is that you're pursuing in terms of filmmaking. If you're a writer, no matter what, write something. You got to sit at the desk and you have to give yourself an assignment. You have to write a new short story or a new idea or a one-page script or a page of a script you're already working on. But you have to allocate time to be either growing, learning, or executing whatever skill that you or career that you want to get into. And if it's directing, obviously directing is a little bit harder because you don't want to keep just directing little films every week. But how can you absorb or learn something new? I think one thing for directing would be reading up on acting or taking an acting class or learning a lot about framing and compositions of frames and how you can tell your story through imagery. Obviously, writing I think is a little bit easier. You just have to write. You have to do that kind of thing. If it's visual effects, find a small project, or find some shots. Or there's plenty of options online where you can download plates and background elements and just practice it. But it's easier said than done when I say just do it. But really what it is you just have to allocate and schedule time every week.
Wonderful. Love that. Well, before we go, is there any website or link to your films that you want to plug? Like, are you on social media or anything you want people to get in touch with you?
No, what's funny is I'm pretty, I have a pretty small footprint when it comes to social media and putting myself in front of the camera or whatnot. But yeah, in terms of just plugging anything, I mean, I think it'd be cool. Check out Project Arbiter on YouTube. Check out Whipping Boy on YouTube. And stay tuned for Delve and this Future is Back project. I think they're going to be pretty cool.
Where would they find that when it launches? Would it be on the same YouTube channel?
So a lot of you can find a lot of this stuff either on YouTube or Burning Ideas, Michael Chance's site. He has a lot of his own director stuff. For Delve and Future is Back, again, they'll all have my own personal websites.
Cool. Well, I'll put those links in the show notes, and you can give me the link to those films when they come out, and we'll update that page for anybody listening later.
In 5 years. Yeah, sounds good.
In 5 years, yep. That's how long it takes to make good stuff, guys.
Yeah.
Well, Jesse, thank you so much. This was a pleasure to talk with you, and just thank you for your time.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was a good time.
All right, you made it to the end. I love you for that, seriously. And in case you forgot, I'm your host, Adrian Thompson. An important note, this podcast is sponsored by Plot, the easiest way to build, organize, and collaborate on storyboards. If you work on any type of video project, I'm sure it could save you a lot of time. So create your free account today at theplot.io. All the notes and related links mentioned in this episode will also be available on Plot's website at theplot.io/002. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and we'll see you next time.